that nonsense. You broke got nonsense. I bought hard like Dennis Rodman. No lying. I just bought that new engine, I did it.
I love cars, driving, racing, all of it.
It's a passion I developed when I was about 17, and I became obsessed with it so much that not long after I went out and bought this. A good old RX-7, the FC model, and it's got no engine. It's been sitting in that garage for quite some time, but I bought it with the hopes of getting to build it one day, and funnily enough, this passion was kickstarted by anime. Initial D to be exact, and that's part of the reason why I'd say it's probably my favorite anime.
And while I love Initial D, this week we're going to be taking a look at racing anime other than that fucking masterpiece.
And the first show we're going to be taking a look at is a little show from summer of '07. Wangan Midnight is all about that underground shit. Cars flying on the highway at 300 kilometers per hour racing for street cred. Cool street nicknames like Devil Z, which is a souped up Fairlady Z, or the Blackbird, which is a twin turbo Porsche. The cars are one of the things I found fresh about this anime. It doesn't just focus on JDM or Japanese domestic market cars. It has other makes like Porsche and Ferrari in it too. But the car that takes the most limelight in this show is the previously mentioned Devil Z, driven by the main character Akio, who first stumbled upon it when shopping for cars in a scrapyard. The junkyard employee is reluctant to sell it at first, explaining that the car is cursed, that the car will betray you, and about its lineage of different drivers and accidents. Akio doesn't give a shit though. He felt the car calling to him, so he buys it and ignores all the warnings. That's the basic start to the plot, and as the story progresses, which it does pretty quickly, the mysteries of the curse and how the specific car is bound to all the different characters is revealed piece by piece. Speaking of the characters,
I wasn't expecting to get so damn attached to them.
they're all interesting and likable. The show does a great job of telling their backstories as well as exploring the reason behind their passion and drive for racing. Even the characters that aren't racers are interesting, like the tuner from Hell, who becomes pretty relatable when you get to see his backstory and his passion for building cars with his own two hands. Which, by the way, he becomes a pretty important character later on, considering that Wangan Midnight chooses to focus more on the car's engine and tuning rather than technical driving. Which is totally fine, but considering how often they're working on their cars, it would have been cool to see the show go into a bit more detail on the mechanical side of things. Instead, they kinda just turn the wrench and then the scene changes. Well, you've done a great job so far, Kia Spectra 5, but I think it's about time we give you a little bit of an extra boost by adding a turbo. As far as how it portrays a sense of speed, episode 1 did a really good job with this scene, where every car except the Devil Z is frozen, and Akio explains that while you're going at such speeds, everything around you feels like it's in slow motion. Outside of that, the show still does a great job at portraying that sense of speed, with really good music that has super heavy hitting drums and a bit of a metal sound to it, and the roars of engines climbing RPMs, desperately clawing for more power. The animation during races is great too. The cars look great and have a lot of detail, as well as great 3D camera work. The cinematography stays on point the entire show, and when they start to reach top speeds, the camera starts shaking, so you really feel that shit. Overall, the races are very enjoyable, which is good because the show doesn't really stray away from the racing too much. A large majority of the anime is spent on the Wangan Highway, so every episode you're going to be getting to sink your teeth into a lot of street racing goodness. Also, quick side note, because of the attention to detail for the crash scenes, which there's quite a few of, you can start to piece together part of what's causing the Devil Z's quote-unquote curse a bit before it's directly explained to you by the show. I just thought it was cool because I felt like a smarty pants when I was able to guess what the issue was. I would definitely recommend Wangan Midnight if you're in a racing mood. It has a lot to enjoy and captures the essence of street racing good enough to have me excited to start each new episode. Just a quick warning though, there's a weird time skip episode 7 that made it a bit confusing, only for a bit though, and it didn't bother me that much. But that's enough about Wangan Midnight.
Next, we're going to be taking a look at a little movie called Redline.
To start off, I'd highly recommend Redline to anyone watching. It's just an hour and a half and you don't need to know shit about racing to enjoy it. It's super creative and out there, with these wild space car designs and different alien species. You see, the Redline is a super dangerous anything goes style race, which happens to be held on a pretty hostile planet this year. So during the race, you don't just get to see the action of the cars boosting, but there's like fucking mechs shooting at them and shit too. The animation and the music for the races makes it the definition of high octane. Look at these giant clouds of dust, and the way the car violently shakes from the abundance of power while accelerating. And the music hits hard too. Somewhat similar to Wangan and Midnight's OST with super heavy hitting drums and a somewhat metal sounding synth to go with the space race type atmosphere. While it doesn't go into detail on racing techniques, nor is it realistic at all, it shares the feeling of that intense adrenaline rush you get from stepping on the gas perfectly through the music and animation.
Definitely give Redline a shot next time you're having trouble deciding on what to watch.
So, now that I've shown you that super wacky and fresh portrayal of racing, let's take a look at a more down-to-earth and realistic version of the sport.
Capeta is a racing anime about the most technical style of racing.
Initially focused on go-karting, as the show progresses and Capeta gets older, it shifts to F1, which makes sense considering they're both forms of racing focused on perfecting the fundamentals of racing, with F1 being the more extreme side of it. I was caught super off guard by Capeta. I wasn't even expecting to like the show, let alone resonate with it as much as I have.
It does start off a little slow, showing Capeta to be a lonely 4th grader who gets picked on
And pretends to be happy and fine, so his dad, Shige, doesn't worry about him. His father works for a paving company and is actually very caring. He just wants to make his son happy. So while on the job at a go-kart track one time, he considers that Capeta would probably love to race. Upon finding out how much a go-kart actually costs, he decides that he's gonna build one out of scraps that the track has left over. Not long after, Shige has a few self-reflection scenes where he realizes that Capeta had been putting on a fake smile the whole time, and how badly Capeta really needed that kart. After this, there's a lot of really heartwarming scenes showing their adventures building the kart and gathering a small race team. By the end of episode 3, Capeta is in his kart on the track and our lovable small team of underdogs is finally established.
Considering the anime starts right at the beginning of Capeta's racing journey, you get to learn and grow as a racer alongside him.
And since go-karting is such a technical kind of racing, the show teaches you a lot about the fundamentals, like racing lines and the timing of your braking and acceleration. However, this anime doesn't really do anything insane to depict that feeling of speed, outside of having nice cinematography for some of the corners. And the music doesn't really convey that feeling of reaching top speeds, but the feeling of accomplishment and motivation. However, the animation does pay really close attention to detail for the previously mentioned stuff like brake timing and racing lines, as well as the little things like the kart's mechanisms and how the drivers lean into the corners.
Overall, Capeta is a great show and it can teach you a lot about the core of racing.
With lovable characters and full to the brim with heartwarming, heartbreaking, and educational scenes. If you want to immerse yourself in a down-to-earth and honest anime all about optimizing your driving to shave milliseconds off of your times, I would give this one a go.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed this week's look at racing and anime.
And as much as I'd love to talk about Initial D, I've already covered it in my first review. But I think my content's gotten a lot better since then, so I do plan on revisiting the show in the future. I feel like my first video didn't really do the anime justice, as well as I just have a lot more I want to say about it now. But that most likely won't happen for a while. So until then, keep an eye out for it, as well as my other weekly uploads. Thank you as always so much for watching, and once again, special thanks to everyone supporting me on Patreon. Takumi, Baron, Waker, Juicy, Clay, Spooky Snake, Kent, and Cumbelly the Fulfilled. You guys' support means the fucking world to me, so thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.